Welcome to the Turnaround Talk Show and Podcast. I'm your host, Marcia Tepperman, the creator of the Turnaround Method. And in this show, me and my guests will have fascinating conversations on how to use adversity as a springboard to create a thriving life. Today, my guest is Dr. Gary Salyer. Dr. Gary is a master transformational relationship coach, helping people rewire their brain and rewrite their love rules. He is the author of the bestseller Safe to Love Again, How to Release the Pain of Past Relationships and Create the Love You Deserve. He is a featured relationship expert in a variety of stages, as well as radio and TV shows in the US. Today's episode is all about love and loving well. Dr. Gary, welcome.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, Marcia.
I feel very privileged to have you on the show today. Thank you for accepting the invitation. Gary, I would like to have a conversation with you about how couples and families can turn relationship issues around and create a loving and supporting atmosphere. But firstly, could you please tell us a little bit more about what led you to write your book, Safe to Love Again, and to become a relationship expert?
Well, thank you for asking that question. It's been one of those lifelong journeys. I can honestly say that it started when I was 7 and at a party noticing that a lot of my aunts and uncles, when they got drunk, weren't so loving, weren't so nice to each other. And I didn't understand why adults couldn't love each other better. It just didn't make any sense to me. So by the time I get to college and I realized that there are so many divorces, I decided that I'm going to college to make sure that never happens. Not to me, not to I. And so I had a degree in religion, a degree in psychology. In my senior year, a professor gives me a personality test. Says, come on in, take it. A few days later, gives me the results. And as I'm walking out the door of his office, he says, oh, by the way, you've got a 90% chance of having a divorce. And it was like a thunderclap of, are you kidding me? And I delayed graduation for a whole year. I could have graduated that year. Got another degree in marriage and family. So imagine my utter surprise when I think I've dodged that bullet, done everything I could. And there it is. 12 years later, my first wife says, I want a divorce. I was shocked. I mean, how did this happen? So this time I go through 7, 8 years of therapy and I go, this will never happen again. And then I get remarried and 4 years later, divorce is knocked on my door again. And now it's like, hey, I was not one of those guys that had a phobic response to the word therapist, And it was at that time after I realized that my relationships were repeating, that I was managing my pain. I wasn't changing it. And I said, nobody should work this hard. If they can't crack the code, then I will. And it was that whole life pilgrimage. That's why I started doing the research, and the book came out of all that, working with clients, all that research.
And so how long it took you to write this book? Because I know you had a manuscript of the book, like a much longer one, which was based on your research. And then you have the book that we now can buy online and on the shops. What was that process like?
Well, I can really say the book was about 10, 12 years in the making with research. And the writing was about 3 years. And the original manuscript was indeed 622 pages, but it got edited down to 239, something far more manageable.
And I read your book, as you know, and I love the book. And so one of the ideas in your book that made me want to work with you, because full disclosure here, Dr. Gary is my coach, is that there are feelings we all need for finding and maintaining healthy love. And when I realized that, maybe I don't have those feelings. Can you tell us a little bit more about these feelings?
Yeah. So what it comes down to is, the book is basically a new theory of attachment theory. And you got it. And the holy grail is You know, attachment theory, you find out you have these love styles. 50% of the population are secure. They do well in love. They pick and choose people who love and love them back, and they love. But then there's the anxious who are afraid of always when does love go away, and the avoidants who are afraid when is love going to stay. Kind of, you know, when will I get depended on? When do I, you know, or I depend on somebody else? And we know that these three love styles, there's a fourth too, but it's beyond the scope of the book. They track from the time a baby is 1 to 1.5 years old. Something called the strange situation, where if you separate a baby from their mother based on how they react to the mom returning, you can tell whether a baby is likely to be secure, anxious, or avoidant. And it will track for the rest of their life, barring intervention. So I asked myself, what tells a 1.5-year-old child that they are loved? Well, at 1.5, prefrontal cortex isn't online. So it's not logic. It's not beliefs. It's not the story we tell. It's not identity. I am Marcia, right? It's none of that, because the hardware isn't even online. The only thing that's online are feelings. Feelings. And so then I began to ask myself, based on a lot of really interesting developmental psychology and some of my own work with clients, what are the feelings that tell you you're loved? Because surely not all of them are equal. And it turns out that the 4 feelings that tell these babies and all the rest of us, because it's our natural GPS, it gets put down between 0 and 3, is, do you feel welcomed with joy? Oh, so good to see you today, Marcia. Or when someone wakes up in the middle of the, in the morning, and you hear the words, good morning, gorgeous, or good morning, handsome. That's welcome with joy. Come over here, it looks like you need a hug. Worthy to reach out for your needs, where if you ask for something, you're going to get a congruent response back. It's okay. You're worthy and deserving. The other one is cherished and protected. Cherished and protected is I get to go out and explore and be a me, get to separate, but I also get to come home to the home port in somebody's heart. I get to be a we. So that me and a we I call cherished and protected, and that's the feeling. And then the last feeling is empowered with choice. Do I get to have a voice? Do I get to have my wins? Do we co-create? Do we share influence? If you are feeling welcomed and worthy and cherished and empowered, you're feeling pretty loved. But if you're not, if you're feeling unwelcomed or unworthy or not so cherished or disempowered, I guarantee you'll be thinking something's wrong with the relationship. If one of them are missing in a relationship, you're thinking, gosh, we could work on things. I wonder if there's a workshop we could go to. 2 of them are missing, you're thinking, what's the number of my best friend's therapist? And if 3 or 4 are missing, you're in a toxic relationship. That's your brain's natural GPS. 4 feelings that tell you you're loved or not. It's not as complex as some dating coaches make it. It's not rocket science. If a 1.5-year-old can figure it out, so can you.
So it is not enough to understand your attachment style. You really need to understand what you call the rights, right, in the book as well, or have those rights, like fully embody those rights. Do you want to talk about the rights?
Yes. Every one of these feelings that's given between 0, there's a developmental one. It's the first 2 months a baby's either welcomed or not. They get welcomed with joy, right? And then the next one is when they're being fed and cared for, potty, given binkies, change their blankets, whatever, or diapers. That gives you worthy and nourished. And then when they first separate as a toddler, do they feel cherished and protected? Are you looking over them? And then when the terrible twos, you're getting more empowered with choice and the right to create your experience. Now, the funny thing about feelings is every feeling we have is really a motivational state. Now, and it's mostly coming from our right brain. Now, the fact of the matter is that feelings don't have words. But if they had words, they would say 2 words, yes or no. So all these feelings are permission slips. They're rights for certain actions, certain states, certain relationships. When we feel welcomed, We have a right to feel like we have a right to exist, which means the world is a cozy oyster, and we get to feel we get to be fully connected to our body, not just living in our head above here or up here in the netherworld of chakras, or I wouldn't say chakras. It's like, when you're to spirituality, chakras are good things. They're basic. That was a misstep. And then there's a right worthy. When the baby reaches out and there's a congruent response, you don't have to get it perfect. Moms don't the 70% the first time. But if you eventually keep working on the baby, she works pretty good at making sure my needs met. I must be pretty worthy, right? And so then you have a right to reach out for your needs. When you get to explore, you get to be a me. You get a right to separate and belong. Not one or the other, not all separation, where you get to be the marble mate, or all belonging, where you get to be enmeshed. You get to go out, explore your world, and come back to a cherished home port. Then, if you have got the feeling of empowered, you are given a right to create your own experience. You get to be good with all of your feelings, good and bad, mean and kind, strong and weak. And you get to be the standard of your own experience, not someone else laying it all on you. But you also get, at the same time, it gives you the right to assert. You get to have voice. You get to have choice. And then when the brain at 3 adds up these 4 feelings, it decides whether it has a right to love and be loved right back. These are the 6 rights these 4 feelings give us. A right to exist, a right to have our needs met, a right to separate and belong, which is like to be a me and a we, a right to create your own experience, a right to assert, and a right to love and be loved right back. But if we don't get those feelings, then we don't get the full right. So if you weren't totally worthy, you won't reach out for your needs. If anything happened when as a toddler, you may have got more right to separate, then you won't feel so comfortable in a we. Or you may not have been given a voice, so you don't have a right to assert. The negative feelings create what I call missing rights.
I know too about the missing rights. Yeah.
If you're out there and you're listening to this, just take inventory. This isn't just a head trip here. This is a full body. All these feelings live in your body. Just notice 1 to 10. If you're out there listening to this, how welcome do I feel in my relationship? Or if you're single, just think of a really good past one. And locate where you feel. Do you feel welcomed or unwelcome? Your body will tell you. 1 to 10, how welcomed? If you're a couple, single again, 1 to 10, how worthy do you feel to reach out to have needs met? 1 to 10. 1 to 10, how cherished and protected do you feel? It's okay to be a me and a we. They got your back. 1 to 10. And then how empowered with choice? 1 to 10. I get to have my dreams. They get to be the safety net under the hierarchy act of the aspirations of my life and soul. If any of those are under, I would say an 8, but at least a 7, then that's an area that you probably didn't get a full right, because you pick someone. We always have an experience we have the rights for. So you pick someone that will give you exactly the missing right. And that's an area that needs to be worked on.
As a single, and just in general, I like to think about the relationship, not just as the relationship that we have with other people, but the relationship we have with ourselves, which I think is the most important one for us to have good relationships with other people. And I think that the idea of checking with ourselves how we feel about those rights, regardless of other people, gives you also a pretty good indication of how you are with your past experiences and where you're at with your with your rights and your feelings in general. Would you agree?
Yeah, when I got sometimes when couples come to me, like I work with both singles and couples, sometimes I'll just have this. So 1 to 10, how worthy. I just did that last week, and sure enough, it will usually be a predictor of what the childhood experience was like, because these rights are like cookie cutters. They're little tiny things. when they're little. But then they just get bigger, but it's the same shape of experience.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Got it. So where do you think that most couples' issues come from, Gary?
Most couples, the average couple is dealing with I call dueling missing rights. That each of them have a missing right, right? So they only have a right to not say somebody has a missing right to have their needs met. They don't have a full right to reach out. So they only have a right for someone who's a little more selfish or is a taker or something like that. If they don't have a full right to separate and belong because they didn't feel so cherished and protected as a little one, they will find somebody that maybe is more distant, like their father or mother who gave them that right, right? And both people, their compass directs them exactly to the person they have the rights for. So their missing right will show up in the partner, and then they will resent each other. And what they don't realize, they married each other for exactly the circular argument or missing move. For instance, one couple, she had grown up in a very abusive family, never felt like she belonged. Father was alcoholic, didn't want to belong to an alcoholic because it's dangerous in that way, right? And twice divorced, she's really wanting to belong. Well, after a second divorce, she meets a guy that she knew in high school. Now, he was just coming out of a 25-year plus marriage. Now, his missing right was she had what's called a split right to separate and belong, more right to separate, but she was anxious. She wanted to belong. His, on the other hand, was his father was very dominating, wouldn't let him have his experience. He didn't have a voice. What does that look like in his past marriage? In 26 years of marriage, he never once initiated sex. That's a pretty strong missing right to assert or to create your own experience for a guy. We'll just, it's not often that shows up in my office. So she dominated things. So when they start dating, the day comes when out there, it's over the holidays, and the children and the past wife says, we don't want her at Christmas. So he has no right to assert. He has no right to create his experience. So in order to make everybody happy, he goes, okay, that's fine. And so he tells his fiance, we'll just celebrate Christmas later, but I'll have to do it by myself over there. Now, what does that hit her? Her missing right to belong, right? And when she has no right to belong, she comes after him and makes him, guess what? Feel more disempowered. And the more disempowered, the less he can assert, the more she doesn't feel that she belongs. And the less she belongs, the more he gets disempowered. Now they're giving each other dueling missing rights. So when we gave him back a full right to assert and a right to create his experience, he was able to say, sorry, this is my beloved. We'll be celebrating holidays together. And when she was included, she was very empowering. She was a very successful entrepreneur. And what's that look like? How she empowered him? Well, he lost his job, and within a month, she found him another one that paid even more money. That's pretty empowering, right?
Wow.
Now they're circling up. They get married, and it's cool when you get when they call you several years later and say, this is our anniversary and we have a good marriage because of you. We just replaced missing rights that duel with, the rights that actually lift up.
So that is a good segue for my next question. So if, say, they wouldn't work on this, they would continue to go around and with those recurrent patterns, they would probably break up, because she wouldn't want to have a relationship with a guy who she doesn't belong, right? And he's completely loyal to his family, and it's not happening. So in a situation like that, when a couple is already together, they've been together for many years and they love each other, but they're stuck in a recurrent pattern, how can they turn things around and feel really connected?
Well, that's a complex question, Marcia. The first thing and I write about it, but all couples are having the experience they have the rights for. Now, a lot of therapists, coaches will try to work on the skill set. And we know from years of couples research now, the Gottman's research, for instance, we know what the skill set of the masters is. But if you just give a couple better skills, they won't work. They won't do it because they don't have the rights to that experience. I actually know of Gottman, certified trainers who have told me professionally, I can teach this, but I can't do it myself for more than 3 weeks with my spouse. Now, the reason why is because they don't have the rights. They don't have the internal feelings to give. I worked with one couple, and she had a missing right to have her needs met, right? And her way of dealing with that was, man, she was really good at criticism. She was very good at giving the feeling of unworthy that she got, right? And I remember teaching her this experience, this skill, but no matter what happened, she just could communicate in subtle ways how unworthy was, even though it was about responding. And the way I explain this is, we only have the feeling that we have to give. Even if we have a different skill set, we'll wind up giving the old feeling, which is why we want to swap out unworthy for worthy and disempowered for empowered. Whatever those missing feelings are, the good ones, we want to give the good ones. When I was I was in my 20s and I met my third grade teacher. And I was speaking and I said, oh my God, it's my third grade teacher. I was in my mid-20s. When we talk, and she tell her I'm getting a PhD, and she was so happy and all this stuff. But she tells me this story because, I was teacher's pet in third grade. I just was. And my sister was 3 years younger than me. I talk about my book. I grew up with a borderline mother. And one of the things my mom wasn't real good on was welcome with joy. That wasn't what you're going to get with the real borderline. And my sister took after more my mother. And Mrs. Grant always had this policy of there would be a greeter of the day, and she always had people coming in, and the greeter of the day would have to go open the door and welcome them in. So when she tells my sister, hey, you're the greeter of the day, my sister goes, well, what do I do? She says, well, when you hear the knock, I'll look at you, and you'll go open the door, and you say, and you'll go, welcome in. She goes, okay. A couple hours later, knock on the door. Mrs. Graham looks. My sister gets up, opens the door, and goes, well, come in. Skill set, but a little different feeling being given. And I have seen versions of this. So you need the skill set. There's I work with couples, but you've got to restore the rights and the secure feelings so they feel in their bones worthy. And people that feel worthy, give worthy. They got to feel welcomed. And they've got to feel safe with that. Then they can give it. If you don't restore the rights and the feelings and allow the system to be safe with having those feelings, because at one point they weren't safe, right? And then you put the skill sets together. You can do miracles with couples, but it can't be just skills. And rights go a long way, but you've got to do both. Better skills, better feelings. What I call, if you put skills and better feelings and rights together, I call that an earned, secure lifestyle.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the we? What is the we in a couple? Because I know there's a lot of people go into marriage, they don't really clarify, first of all, what each other want from it. So the definition of marriage and what they want from it is very different. But then they also come with those missing rights, and then they are maybe not nurturing the marriage itself. Can you talk to us about the we?
Yes. My favorite parts of the book were the parts where I got a 4 a.m. download, right? That where I got this, the we has rights. The we is everything. When I'm working with a couple, you've got these two heads. The we, my real client's right in between their heads, the we. Show me a couple without a we, a real strong connection where they are a team. There's a unitary field between. Doesn't mean they don't get to be separate in eyes, but they have an identity as a couple. a reality as a couple, as partners. You show me a couple without a we, and I'll show you a war. The we is everything. This is why a lot of the couples that come to me have gone through 4 or 5, sometimes therapists or coaches, or that they worked on 2 me's. 2 me's will never make a we. You've got to have a we. You got to build that up. And so the we has a right to exist. It has a right to have its needs met. It has a right to be the arbiter between the 2 me's. It has a right to create its own experience. Creating this we is the thing between a couple. Otherwise, you don't have a couple. In the book, I talk about Todd and Jennifer. In the very first session, she goes, "I want a we," and he goes, "What do you mean a we? There's just 2 me's here." And she breaks out to her, says, "See what I'm talking about?" Both of them had what I call that split right to separate and belong. Now, for her, she got way too much right to separate. And boy, she went in. She had anxious. She wanted in. When are you on the way? For him, he had an intrusive mother. So every time he thought of a we, it was a mom parked that far off his nose, right? So he wants to get away, create his own experience. When he wants to go out in the woods and create his own experience, she feels abandoned. So they had he got way too much right to belong. She got too much right to separate. So he separates and she tries pursuing. But the moment we calmed them down where he could feel empowered and not enmeshed, then a we was possible. Mm-hmm. And when she calmed down and say, without chasing him and pursuing him, but inviting him, miracles happened in their relationship. They had the right to separate and belong, store that, give them different feelings, and they have a far, far different experience with each other. It was a beautiful thing to watch.
So can you just clarify to our audience what do you mean by the moment they are not enmeshed? Can you, because this is a big thing, isn't it?
Yes. Sometimes enmeshed is where it's basically too much right to belong and not enough right to separate, or no right to create your own experience. Either of them will get you there, right? Sometimes you hear the word codependent. Okay, I don't use the word codependent. I don't like labels. A label and $5 just might get you something at Starbucks. Labels don't do anything. They really don't. They just make people feel disempowered. They're good for professional reasons, but they don't do so much when you're working. When people say they're codependent, they either got way too much, no right to have their needs met, so they give, and the odd chance that they may get some crumbs back, or they were given way too much right to belong, and their template for love is being enmeshed. They can't separate. Or they had no right to create their own experience. Somebody else had to be the standard and so they lose themselves. Now, this is way better than saying you're codependent. Now we're getting down to which of the, did you not feel worthy? Did you not feel cherished? Or did you not feel empowered, right? Which version is it? Now it's like, your brain wasn't given a right. Now, and our brains always take the best deal available. That's, if anybody's listening to this, no brain gets up in the morning and says, hey, I'm going to screw with you today. Never says I'm going to screw with my master today. It gets up and says, what's the best deal out of all the ones? Okay, this one. When I was 4, my mother was very abusive, knocked me against walls. I learned to separate rather than be part of that we. At 4, that's the best deal available. But when I'm in my 20s and early 30s and being separate is still the mold for being in a relationship, because that's what felt safe at 3 and 4. And my wife says, I feel lonely, like you're just in the house with me. That didn't make any sense. Of course I love you. I am here. What do you mean you're lonely? That old mold of separation equals safety wasn't going to work. And a lot of people run their old safety program. So this is kind of the art of working with couples, restoring rights, and giving and putting them. It's like giving all these missing rights are old safety protocols. What's the best way to be safe in an early relationship where there was no great deal, just a better deal that was kind of bad or sorry, right? And if you can get them safe with having a better deal. I had to get my brain safe with being in a we, safe with belonging. Then my system could relax. Then I could create a we. And this is the way it is for all couples, all individuals, getting them safe to love again. By giving,
So the enmeshment is that, you'd say, is that attachment to the template that they were given by their family, the way that they were acquired the rights or didn't acquire the rights early in life. And when they're operating from that place, that's when they are enmeshed.
Yes, but they're operating from either enmeshed, where enmeshment is they have no right to separate or to create their own experience. Like, for instance, I've seen one person that was always pulling away, but because when the wife would get fed up and pull away, he would come rushing back in, because at some level, he only had the right to be invaded by an anxious wife. And when she get fed up, suddenly the template of I need somebody to create my experience for me came rushing in. It was not safe if someone, he hated enmeshment. On the other hand, he was only safe with someone creating an experience for him, because he had no idea who he was if he wasn't being told by his wife, and yet he resented her for it. And that's always the case. So once we got him safe with a right to create his own experience, suddenly, he can be a part of a we without losing himself, which was his biggest fear. And she doesn't have to do all these things and begging to get him to come back. Then, it's always, enmeshment is always one of those two things, where it just wasn't safe to belong in a we, or somewhere along the line, we were told somebody else had to create our experience for us.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So complex, right?
Yes.
It's
And
a complete blind spot. I mean, who would know that that's the case? Even if you know that you have an anxious or an avoidant attachment style, if that's all you know, how do you then reach out to restore, restore connection in a relationship, and to not operate from this place of this old template, and that isn't working, there isn't creating a loving atmosphere.
You're absolutely right. Knowing you're anxious or avoidant doesn't really do anything. That was my problem with attachment theory. It was descriptive, it gave labels, but I was at a party some years ago, about 15 miles from here, and there was a community in which about half of that community, there were 20 people at that party who had read the book Attached. Great book, kind of the first primer for attachment theory. And people knew whether they're anxious, secure, or avoidant. And I kept getting the same message. One guy said to me, he says, I got halfway through and I stopped reading because I felt hopeless. I thought I had this huge, sign over my head that said anxious, and then it said screwed. Said there was no hope how I could change it. This book is the way back. This is the roadmap to reclaim your secure. Describing your attachment style, that's cool. That's cool. But how do you prescribe so you can get back these feelings that are your birthright? Mm-hmm. That's the Holy Grail. To how do you find your way back? How does you find a way back to the home of love? A home port in your own heart for love that feels safe and secure. This is why I wrote the book, so people understand it's reclaiming these 4 feelings and the 6 rights that come from these feelings. You reclaim those with some skills, you're good to go.
And it's learning how to resource that from within, right?
It is. And it's in going back and finding those moments when the brain took the best deal available, pulled it right off the shelf. But I like to see missing rights as like layaway plans. These are old things that nobody ever does anymore. Back when I was a kid, my mother, who was poor, would sometimes buy things for Christmas in May, on Hanukkah if you're Jewish, but they don't have that many Hanukkah gifts, and they would be laid away in the store, someplace in the back with your name, and then when you paid for it later, you could bring it home. I like to think of these missing rights. The brain pulls them away because it's not safe in that early family or sometimes that early relationship. So they don't get damaged more than they're unrecoverable. And so then you can recover them later. So the brain always does what it needs to protect its rights. And sometimes it pulls them off the shelf so they will be available later. We just have to make it safe.
Fascinating. One last question for you. If a family is experiencing conflict and friction, it could be amongst husband and wife, it could be amongst other people, there could be a child that is like a focal problem in the family. What would be the antidote for the lack of harmony that they're experiencing that would create a more loving home environment?
There's another deep question. There's a lot of answers. So I will give a couple of easy ones at first, okay? I think when most people come up with, and they have these conflicts, most people get real defensive. Well, you can't say that about me. How could you think that? Instead of really listening and honoring that person's experience, we tend to get defensive and saying, wow, I'm sorry you feel that way. Tell me more. And to quit taking it so personally. And what's the worst part of that? And really most couples do ping pong, back and forth, defending rather than listening. The reason the argument continues for days and weeks and months and years and decades, because neither felt. What stops the argument, why people keep going back, I can't believe you said that was 18 years ago, right? Well, the reason is they never felt. In loving relation, we feel felt by the other. Stopping the defensiveness along to get curious until you can repeat their experience and they feel felt. And then they listen long enough, 5-10 minutes, so that you feel felt. This will do wonders. Stopping the persuasion and enabling the fixing, not the fixing, but the feeling. Without fixing, no fixing, just feeling. You'd be surprised what that does for conflicts.
Like a wholehearted apology. When you apologize, you just don't say sorry. You say sorry for what exactly you are sorry for, right? Rather than just saying sorry, which you can't really resonate when you hear sorry without, what are you sorry for?
Yes, and sometimes one partner may not feel like it's just, but you own up and take responsibility for what you can. Yeah. At least, the point is to really understand how each other feels and to take responsibility. That's the biggest thing that will help with, and to stop persuasion. Trying to produce, they're wrong or you're right, whichever way you want to. I was just talking to somebody today and I had to tell him, you can either be right or you can be in a relationship. What is it? I reserve that for a lot of guys when they're couples, and because men naturally want to fix, or, and that doesn't work. Women need to be felt. So do men, they just don't know. So again, it rolls down to feelings. If we can make each other feel felt, most time the problem fixes itself.
And that's the same for children, right? The mirroring that will help calm down the nervous system for children is when you're feeling them, right?
Oh yeah. In fact, a lot of times, sure, it's called emotion coaching. The heart of parenting is emotion coaching. It's like when a 3-year-old is outside on their tricycle and they hit that bump in the road and they fall and they skin their knees and they're crying. They don't know what they're feeling. I can still come up and hugging my little son. Kenny's now much bigger. And saying, oh, that must be very scary when that road comes up and gets and bites your knee. He goes, yeah, it was scared. He wasn't angry. He was scared. Yeah, I'm scared, And just giving a hug and saying, it's okay, that must feel scary when you don't always know what will happen. Yeah, and whatever we show them, they will give back. I can still remember walking through the house when he was 4, and I stubbed my toe, something horrible, right? And I said some things I might not repeat here, you know. And he comes over and does the same thing. I'm on the ground. He just hugs me, taps me on the head, says, "You must be feeling sad."
That's good. And the other thing that I learned from you is about giving our children those feelings, right? The 4 feelings. So one way to restore issues with children who are becoming problematic at home or not, or they just, maybe you haven't been your best because you just didn't know any better, because that's your template, and you haven't been able to give those feelings to your children. So we can also give those feelings to our children as well.
Oh, absolutely. I had one client, and this is how you can work with kids. Kids need to understand this GPS. I'll tell you 2 stories. I worked with one little couple. They had a 3 and 5-year-old, and they were coming in just because they wanted a better relationship. Most couples don't just want a better relationship, come in because they got problems. But they thought they were at a 5 because of the drain of the kids. And I said, you can always teach these 4 feelings of welcome, worthy, cherished, and empowered to your kids. So they began to teach their 3 and 5-year-old son. And they came in one session and said, this stuff does work. Says one day, the 3-year-old grabs a truck and whacks the 5-year-old across the head with the truck. And the 5-year-old turns to his 3-year-old brother and says, I don't feel very cherished and protected. Now, imagine what those 2 boys will be like when they get to be 20 and they're dating and they know they need to make a woman feel welcome, worthy, cherished, and empowered, and they need to feel that back. Imagine there's going to be some lucky girls, right? And then there'll be a lucky woman when they marry. So with one, I was working with a single man who had gotten custody of his children, and back from a wife who had gotten custody and having borderline personality disorder. They were a mess for 4 years. They were a mess. And he says, I'm working on myself. What do we do with these children? Well, at 5 and 7, I think is what the children were at that age. That's not my wheelhouse of working. That's just not. But I did say, I want you for once a week. You got 4 feelings, 4 weeks, a month. So 1 week, you over supper, talk about the feeling of welcomed with joy. Next week, worthy and nourished. Next week, cherished and protected. And the next week, empowered with choice. Rinse and repeat every month. After 5 months, his children began to change. And they just practiced it with him, talked about it. He was walking into preschool with his little 5-year-old daughter, and at a PTA meeting in the fall. And the little girl looks at one teacher and says, Daddy, that teacher isn't very good with welcome with joy. And they settled down. So, this system does work because this is your brain's natural GPS for love. This is just giving your brain back what is its birthright. It's natural. And if you practice it and you talk about it and you can feel those and give them to each other, children will automatically pick it up. They're nature's best learners. They're closer to it than we are. They'll pick it up faster than we will.
They still remember it. They still remember they have that right.
Yes. They won't be able to articulate it that way, but they know it when they feel it. I mean, I still think I was listening to Terry Real, who was a renowned couples therapist, was talking about how he and his wife used to talk about their caseloads over supper together. And I remember him telling a story about he had a 6-year-old daughter. And the daughter was listening in to them talking about this one couple. And they're talking about doing this, but do we do cognitive behavioral therapy? Do we do this? Do we do that? And the 6-year-old just says, Mommy, Daddy, why don't you just tell them to be nice to each other? Well, and they thought, yeah, it sounds better.
Simple, so simple.
Yes. So it works with all ages. Because this is, when you read the book, you'll find out this really is how the brain was wired to expect feelings, to get feelings. We're just recovering our natural birthright as human beings. 4 feelings. And if we use that versus a list of singles, we use a list of all dark and handsome and all, and the other 64 things we put into match.com, that'll lead us into the woods. What's more important, go on a date, find out how welcome, worthy, cherished, and empowered do I feel. If after 5 dates you're not feeling all 5, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, I heard that before. Gary, thank you so much. So much wisdom, so much insight. Yeah, I'm so thankful for your work and for your book and for your coaching and for you being here and talking to us today. I'm really grateful.
Well, I am grateful for you too, Marcia. You're doing big stuff in the world, and you're out here doing podcasts and getting things out. And it is an honor and a pleasure to be able to serve you and your people. And there in Australia, we're all working to raise consciousness on the planet. So thank you for being a part of your beautiful podcast.
So to find you, people should go to your website. Do you want to share how they can connect with you?
Yeah, if you go to GarySalyer.com, SALYER.com, you can sign up for my love notes. It says love inspirations, and there's and if you can also reach out to me. There's a singles and couples page. You have other questions, or you feel like there's more you'd like to reach out for, possible, if there's something deeper work that you need with as a single couple, you can always reach out to me there. There's a contact page. So GarySalyer.com.
And so many good videos on your website and on your Facebook group as well, right? You have a Facebook group?
Yeah, I do. I have one for Dr. Gary Salyer, and then Safe to Love Again.
Safe to Love Again on Facebook. Lots of past podcasts, and a lot of insight. To start experiencing Gary's work. Thank you so much, Dr. Gary, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you.
The Turnaround Talk Show and Podcast is brought to you by Marcia Tepperman. You can find me on my website, www.marciatepperman.com.au, or you can connect with me on social media via Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to being with you again soon.